I'll let Pahoua kick us off with introductions here.
Yeah, thank you, Kim, and thank you, AHP, for having Jett and me. Again, I'm Pahoua Yang Hoffman. I'm the Senior Vice President of Government Community Relations for HealthPartners. I also had the great privilege of having accountability for our 8 hospital foundations, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Been a fundraiser for almost my entire career, and right before this role, I was overseeing grant making for our community foundation. So glad to be with all of you today.
Well, thank you. And I'm Jett Winders. I'm the Director of Sales with Heller Consulting. I've been a nonprofit fundraiser for 20 years. I started as a Razor's Edge user at a nonprofit arts organization, and then I've had the privilege of supporting nonprofits and foundations and higher education organizations at several agencies that do online fundraising programs or support technology. I've been with Heller for about 4 years, and let me share a little bit about Heller Consulting and the work that we do. Heller has been around for a little over 25 years, and it's an agency dedicated to helping nonprofits use technology better. And the technology that nonprofits use to do that has changed a lot over those 25 years. And so we like to think the core of what we do and help our clients understand is what it is that they need to accomplish from a business perspective. And then once you know what those needs are, you're able to survey the technology landscape and really identify tools and put those tools in place that are going to help you achieve that. And so that's why our work is focused on technology planning and also implementing some of those really key systems that we know help nonprofits be successful. You know, Heller's a great group of folks that work across the U.S. and Canada, and we only work with nonprofit and higher education organizations. So, you know, understanding, you know, their needs and particularly fundraising needs is really core of what we do at Heller. So what we'll talk about today is I'll lead us through a conversation and be inviting Pahoua to come in and answer some questions as we get some background about HealthPartners and the foundations that are doing important fundraising work in support of HealthPartners. And then we'll talk about their journey to really gather stakeholder feedback, develop requirements, develop a technology vision, and ultimately prepare themselves to select a new fundraising CRM solution and plan for how they would put that in place within the organization. And we'll learn lots of, I'll be sharing a lot of the process of how we've done that methodology, but Pahoua will really be sharing the insights into what they've learned as part of this process and how it's helped the organization move forward. And so just to give a overview of what that journey has looked like so that you can have some context for the conversation that we'll have, HealthPartners is supported by 8 geographically distributed hospital foundations that are really focused on the unique needs of their communities and doing important fundraising work within those communities. And each have had, you know, independent work, choosing their own systems, using their own fundraising CRMs over that time. And we've come to a process where we're really looking for opportunities for efficiency, making sure folks have the technology that they need, optimizing the way these foundations are doing their work so that they can, you know, have both the support that they need, but also do what's unique to them while still having the technology to support them. And so that's what this real journey has really been about. And where Heller has come in has been bringing a process to lead the foundations and HealthPartners through a discovery process, development requirements, and ultimately develop a vision for that CRM solution. And I'll share a little bit more about what that methodology looks like. So it starts with a strategic discovery effort where we're really trying to include as many voices as possible in this process, uncover what it is people are doing now, how they're getting that work done, what are the things that they don't feel are well supported, so what are those gaps in that work, and what is the potential if they had solutions that could help them work better, you know, what would that look like, what would that allow them to do, so that we can ultimately come up with requirements for what do we even want technology to do for us. So before we ever look at systems systems. We really want to understand what role is it supposed to play in our offices and in our daily work. And as we think about, all the things that we heard in discovery, making sure that we prioritize those requirements, because there's going to be some things that are essential to get the day-to-day work done. Some are going to be strategic things that, we know is the next step to move our organization forward. And some are going to be, these are nice to have. These are things that might make life easier, but maybe we don't make our decisions based on those. And so that's where that prioritization comes in and is really critical. And then as you start to do those requirements, you're really able to start narrowing what solutions would be appropriate for you. So with the 8 foundations, how are they going to use it? Are these separate solutions? Is this a single solution? From those requirements, you can really start to determine, what is a platform or fundraising CRM that would really achieve these unique set of needs and goals, and use that as a lens to ultimately move into that evaluation phase where you're seeing solutions in action, understanding how you would use them on a day-to-day basis, and then feel really confident in your choice. And so the conversation we'll have today is talking about this journey so that when you get to the end, finally evaluating solutions, you can feel really confident that what you ultimately select is going to meet your needs. So with that, I think it'd be great to step back and get a little bit more background on, you know, um, what is HealthPartners? Share more about the organization and the 8 foundations that are doing such important work in support of it.
All right, Jett, you can take a breather from talking. I'll take over for just a second here. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, just a little bit about HealthPartners. So HealthPartners is an integrated um, healthcare organization consisting of a health plan and also care delivery that includes medical, dental, and specialties. And we operate our clinics and hospitals in Minnesota and also in Western Wisconsin. So we provide care through 55 primary care clinics, 22 urgent care clinics, 8 hospitals, and then also our Virtual Well, our 24/7 online clinic. Um, on the foundation side, we have 8 foundations because we have 8 hospitals. And so moving on to the next slide, yes, our foundations exist to serve our hospitals, clinics, and other local community because as all of you know, 10 to 15% of health happens in our clinical setting, but 80 to 90% really happen outside of our clinics and facilities. And we want to make sure that our foundations are also poised to serve the communities where they are located. And since HealthPartners' founding in 1957, HealthPartners remains the largest consumer-governed nonprofit healthcare organization in the country. And what we mean by that is that our health plan members serve as our board of directors. And I think it's with that spirit that we've come to the conclusion that instead of merging all of our foundations into one, which is happening across the country and probably in organizations that are familiar to you, we've decided that there is a benefit to our community and to us by having 8 separately operating foundations serving their local communities. And so ours range both in terms of geographic, but also just the communities that they serve. So just a few examples to give you the depth and breadth of each foundation. I won't talk about all 8, but if you start with Amory Hospital Foundation, which is in Western Wisconsin, that is located in the city of Amory that has 3,000 people. And in that county, Polk County, that's 45,000 people. Moving west to closer to where I'm located in Bloomington, Minnesota, is Regions Hospital Foundation, which is located in our capital city of St. Paul and within Ramsey County, which is in Ramsey County. That Ramsey County has one of the highest rates of poverty than any other county in the metro area. And Ramsey County is also one of our largest counties in Minnesota. And then moving even further west to rural Minnesota, we have Olivia Hospital and Clinic in Renville County, which has about 16,000 residents. And it also touches 2 tribal communities and 8 surrounding counties. And really the hospital here in this location is the main connector of connecting 10 isolated cities throughout the county and serving them as one community. So even those three examples gives you a sense of the range of communities that we serve.
Yeah, that's great insight, Pahoua, to really illustrate why having the 8 foundations sort of each serving those communities separately rather than a single consolidated foundation would be so valuable to the work that they're doing. So, as you've made that conclusion and drawn that conclusion that it's best to keep that local connection to those communities, why did Health Partners decide to initiate this process to look at efficiencies and optimization with technology without losing that local connection?
As you mentioned in an earlier slide, each of our 8 hospital foundation has its own CRM today. And what we wanted to do was, while we wanted to have 8 separately operating hospital foundations, we thought we could do a better job of having shared services. So right now, today, we are already having shared services in terms of having the same finance department serve all 8. We have a legal partner from our legal department serving all 8 foundations. We have IT as another critical shared service, and marketing and communications. And we thought we could do a better job of working across our 8 foundations if we moved from 8 CRMs to 1, so that we could speak to one another. Our systems could. And so by moving in that direction, could we find some efficiencies that we're not realizing today? And because our 8 foundations are where they're located, there are some geographic areas where they are adjacent to one another. And so we share donors, but they're separate, they're tracked separately within each of the CRMs. And that's where we don't want to make any missteps. If one of our foundation leaders just had a conversation with donor X, and right across the river, we have another foundation leader who is about to meet with that same donor. We want to make sure that the notes are shared easily. And today, we don't have that process in place. And so that was one of the impetus to reach out to an organization like Heller to walk us through even understanding our current state of how we use our CRMs today and looking towards the future. What system might we need to have in place to better work as a system? We call ourselves 8 family of foundations, and we wanted to have a healthier, familiar relationship, you could say.
Yeah, well, and with really that as the sort of driving reason to start this process, but I'm sure not everyone, immediately had that shared vision. And certainly as you got underway, you had to sort of start to engage with folks at the individual foundations and within Health Partners and start to organize on who would be a part of this conversation. So maybe you can share a bit about how you started to bring those stakeholders together to participate in the process.
Yeah, and I will share that. So I've only been with Health Partners for about 21 months. So right when I started, there was this question on the table, and it had been a question that had been asked before, which is, should we move to one CRM? And when I got to Health Partners, that question was being asked again. And I think we were heading down a road of, well, should we just pick from one of the current CRMs that we're using? And that would have been, I think, the fastest, quickest choice to make. But I also heard from heavy users of each of our CRMs that they weren't quite sure if we had a shared vision for where we were going as a family of 8 foundations. And that question hadn't been answered satisfactory to all of us who had been part of this conversation before, because if we picked from one of the current CRMs, it might serve us today, but where were we going? And had that question really been asked? And so when I got here, I think using my new kid card, just asking the question again, have we determine the roadmap where we want to go together? Have we considered what growth looks like for all 8 foundations? What is our philosophy on sharing donor information? Had we really discussed and talked about those things? And then what was the vision for our executive leaders at HealthPartners? How did they see philanthropy play a role now and in the future? And so these were questions I think any of us could ask, but I think I really did not know the answers to these as a new person. And so I think injecting myself into the conversation and asking those again seemed appropriate. And others, I think, were really excited that we were tackling this again before we made any big decisions on a new CRM. So how did we go about engaging stakeholders? I think it's important to, like you said, Jett, step back. And I really appreciate the insights and feedback from those who are working closest with the system. So our heavy users of our database today, what are they seeing? What are the workarounds that they've had to put into place to get the most out of their current system? What's hard for us to get out of the system that if we were to kind of invent our own solution, what would it need to look like? And so right away, just bringing the heavy users together and asking them what works and what doesn't work in the current system that they're using. And then meeting with them individually and then bringing them together helped me understand what were the pain points. And then a key piece for me was sharing those with, I would say, budget decision makers to say, okay, we need to, it's not about quickly finding a solution, but we have an opportunity to put meaningful time to this to really make sure that whatever we end up going with will serve us, not just now, but like I said, in the future. So stakeholders at every level of the organization. So heavy users of the database, foundation, directors, making sure that they understood, and then executive leaders of the organization to say, we need some resources set aside to do this work.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I'm sure people might have thought when you were first coming in, you were just going to come make the decision or push things forward, but to come with that perspective of stepping back, asking folks what's working, what's not working, starting this process of really defining that need before you actually determine a solution can really help bring people together. So, I'm sure there were some challenges that you might have had to overcome in helping folks understand sort of the need for this evaluation and why it was taking place. Maybe you can share some of the things that you had to overcome in that process.
There's a lot here that I could say. I think that, we were also testing the conversation of, should we merge from 8 foundations into one? And that's still a question that's out there. And one that, like I said earlier, we've not made a decision to move down at this time, but that question remains. And so I think just even overcoming that conversation of, is this the right time? And for us, because so many of our foundation leaders were new to their foundation that they were now leading, we just needed some time to understand the community that they were serving. So I think that it's still a conversation for the future to have, but just putting that in a parking lot so that people could feel confident that it's something we're going to get to, but not something we're going to solve for today. So that's one big one. I think that there are users of our current CRM that probably would have felt comfortable using the CRM that they're most familiar with. But we wanted to take a step back and not go to solutions quite yet, but like I said earlier, wanting to better understand the current state of use of the current system, what's working, what's not working. I think that there's also time and funding considerations that we needed to to get over. Could we, for those who wanted us to move away from the CRM that maybe they're using today, that's not that great, getting them to trust the process and that they may have to continue working in that CRM for just a little bit longer while we conducted the discovery work. So I would say there were people within this work, still in this work, that they were at different places. So making sure everybody was on the same page in terms of why were we taking a pause in making a quick change, and why were we spending this needed time to understand everybody's needs.
That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about that discovery process. I know you were able to put together a database steering committee that had members representing folks from different departments within the foundations and key departments within HealthPartners. And really, these folks, had to invest some time and energy in attending weekly meetings and, acting as liaisons for their foundations and putting their expertise and providing input. And, that's all time that they had to devote to this process. And so, their voices are really quite critical to it and sort of a testament to getting these folks on board to participate in this so that they could ultimately help in reviewing those current systems that would then provide feedback into what you need out of your future systems. Maybe you can share a little bit about, what have you learned from even getting that group together? Have there been any surprises that have emerged as you've been meeting with that group regularly?
Yeah, so this is where I think one has to really carefully consider who's going to lead this effort. I'm someone who likes change management work. I like change. I like bringing people along through change. And so, and one of the things that I've said out loud in groups is any kind of change, even when it feels like it's just a technical move, like moving to a CRM seems like just a technical conversation. Every change has with it some emotion. So people, you're talking about real people using systems that they rely on, that they're familiar with. And so anytime you introduce, hey, we're thinking about moving, from one CRM to another, you're going to raise concerns for people. Well, what will that look like? How will that impact me? And so I will say, I volunteered because of my role, but even if I weren't in the role that I have right now, if given the opportunity, this would have been a role I would have wanted, because I think we don't take enough time to consider people's feelings about what's going to happen. And so the role that I played was both managing expectations with senior leaders to say, we're going to be taking some time to do this work. So give us the time. And that I will be leading this work. And then meeting with, like I said, the subject matter experts, the people closest to working with this CRM, making sure that they were trusting me in walking us through a process. And they have to be both knowledgeable about the current database, but also have influence within their own foundation. So not everybody's going to have an appetite for this work. They just want it done already, but there will be individuals for whom this is work that's satisfying for them to do. So I call the steering committee a group of the willing who want to do this work together, right? They find satisfaction in it. They want to make sure it's done well. They're able to communicate with their foundation colleagues to say, here's what's happening. And so that steering committee, what was on the slide previously, this is a steering committee that is made up of representatives from the 8 foundations. They also include representatives from finance, and they include representatives from IT. And we meet every week, which sounds like a lot, and it is. It's a time commitment. So it's an hour a week, every week. And we've been meeting since last November, so it's been a year. And I think that you need a group like this to consistently meet and push that ball forward. if not, you're just going to have so many things that take up your time. So everyone is busy. And we knew that we needed to stay focused on this work. And in order for this to move along and to meet milestones in the timeline that Jett, we put together with the Heller team, we knew that we needed a group that was just going to have that staying power. And so getting the buy-in of senior leaders, getting them to appoint a steering committee member that would be a good representative of that foundation or that department like finance, and then getting the okay to say this is going to be a time commitment. But here's why it's so important. So the group has, like I said, been meeting every week for a year. I chair that meeting. A surprise for me is that we didn't know we needed this group. I was surprised that we needed this group more. Let me put it a different way. I'm a little clumsy with my words. What surprised me was that we got together to work on the CRM, but what came out was this was a trust building group. And what hadn't occurred to me until in the middle of the process is that different hospitals came into the HealthPartners families at different times. And so there was also just cultural differences between the 8 hospitals and therefore the 8 hospital foundations. And so by having this weekly meeting, it served as a great onboarding opportunity for those newer leaders and for me. So we were discovering things not only about the CRM project, but we were discovering things about, oh, is that how you do X, Y, or Z? I didn't know that. And so it served as a trust building environment where we could test other things, not just the current project that was at hand. So I think that to me was a great surprise that we were able to make more use of the steering committee beyond our CRM work.
Well, and that speaks so well to, the time commitment that folks put into this process, which is, valuable to the process, but also sounds like they were getting value out of the process in terms of, onboarding, learning, sharing information with each other. So, they've also been gaining from the experience in addition to sort of supporting the overall effort. So maybe I'll take us forward into, from those conversations, going through the discovery process, then moving into actually developing requirements, which is where we start to put on paper what it is that we want out of this technology solution. And so, what does that look like in terms of a requirements process? We talked a bit about the prioritization. One thing that's unique about your experience is this concept of, universal requirements. Really, what are the core things that all of the foundations are doing as part of their fundraising efforts? So what are those things that are common and really focusing in on those? There may be some other critical components too that, make up the final system that you need. But, this is a place where getting that shared understanding of what is the work everybody's doing and where can there be that shared services so that you can really build efficiencies among the foundations is really critical. And then part of what we did in this process was also do a shared vision exercise with the foundations to really bring home that there's a shared vision for moving forward, again, not just focusing purely on the technology, but it's what are you trying to accomplish? What's the purpose of doing this? And so I'm going to ask you a couple questions about this process, and maybe I'll start with, just your experience in that prioritization process and, why was prioritizing important in this case?
Yeah, that's the prioritization part is really key because there might be some things that users might want today, but it's not shared across the eight foundations, right? So if it's not something that other users want, that might be a high priority for one, but not the other. And as we were trying to build a system that works for most of us or all of us, we had to go through that prioritization exercise. And one of the great things that I appreciate Heller leading us through is that Heller took the time to meet with each foundation individually just to learn about how they're set up today, kind of how they are organized within that specific foundation. And then you were able to share out what each foundation, kind of what were the themes. And from there, we were able to understand more intimately how we were similar and how we were different, because it's not something that just naturally comes out in a meeting where you're giving updates, right? You don't dive that deep into understanding how each of the foundations currently operates. And so I think having that as a foundation was really helpful once we got to the prioritization of shared requirements. And when I spoke to hospital presidents who, of course, understand and care about our philanthropic work, but they're much more familiar with, let's say, fields within our EPIC patient database, right? So when I say to those hospital presidents, what we're trying to figure out and what shared requirements look like in a fundraising CRM are what are the fields similar to kind of patient EPIC fields that we need to have in our fundraising database that maybe we're not capturing today, or if we are capturing today, it doesn't give us enough flexibility to be able to input or get out of the system ways that we think will help us in the future. And so that prioritization was really important to get to a shared set of requirements. And I know that in talking to Heller, past clients, sometimes there are different ways that organizations like ours get to consensus. We were able to get to consensus to have one shared set of universal requirements. And I think part of that was all of that trust building and understanding of how each organization operates. And knowing that, well, that might not be a field I need today, but if 6 out of the 8 of us really see that as a must-have, I can see why we want to build that into our priorities.
Yeah, as you were, going through that process, what other sort of insights came out of it? What other major findings did you uncover as you did the prioritization?
Yeah, so the prioritization, like I said, it started with each individual foundation first. So each foundation was given an exercise and activity to complete, and that was take a look at these fields and weigh them or score them as must have, nice to have, need to have. And each foundation did that work individually. And I think what's really critical to the success of the prioritization is that we came back together as a group of 8 and we looked at each of our scoring together. And that's where a lot of learnings happen, where one foundation might say, oh, I scored that as just a nice to have, but boy, 4 of you scored that as a must to have. Tell me why. I want to know. And so there were shifts. There were changes in the responses afterwards, after those discussions. So while I think it's important to start with individual assignments, I think it's also critical to bring all of that work back and compare the responses across all 8 to see where we were lining up and where there were some different answers. And for some, it was, well, we're just never going to do that, or we've not done that, or we don't have the capability to do that. And that's why it was reflected in our answer. And so that to me was a critical piece. And I'm sure that it was already baked into the Heller process, but we had a couple of rounds of that, Jett, where we had to go back and look into the delta between individual responses and kind of make a call of where we decided to go if it was a split decision, for example, on a particular field.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And even when we're working with only one organization, that is often a place where it's iterative and collaborative because it uncovers differences of opinion, why some folks see something as critical and others don't, and really kind of forces some of those conversations around what is it that we need to do and what should we be doing. And some of those conversations have nothing to do with technology itself. It's about, what are the organization priorities? What's it trying to accomplish?
Yeah,
Um,
and one thing I haven't said yet is, in addition to the geographic differences and the communities that they serve, um, the people power at each of the foundations is different. We have Amy with a one-person office to the larger hospital foundations in the metro where they have full teams of 20. So when we took a look at these universal requirement fields, some of them require um, maybe just more people power than they could do today, right? Which is why we're really building a system for the future, because the current kind of staffing right now could change, or um, in addition to staffing changes, could we do a better job of, say, sharing the foundation resources in terms of staff better, knowing that we were going to move to one CRM. So maybe it wasn't dependent on the current makeup of our employees. If we were to move to one system, for example, could we have one prospect person that serves all 8 foundations? So that helped to change some of the prioritization of our universal requirements.
Yeah, as we move into talking about sort of the technology vision work that you did, one of the frameworks that Heller often uses when talking about technology change is to make sure that we're centering the organization's goals, getting that shared vision of what we're trying to do, but then also recognizing that technology change doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so to your point, if we change technology, that can affect our staffing and our skills and our resources that we need among our people. It can also change our business processes, the day-to-day work that is happening, and the way that the foundations are collaborating with each other, the way that the shared services that are supported from HealthPartners are serving those foundations can also change. And so, it's never just about the technology. It's making sure that as you plan for that change, you're recognizing the impact it's going to have in these other major areas. And that's what this process of collaboration has allowed you to make sure that you can address as you've been having the technology conversation as well. Um, so maybe I'll ask about the technology vision exercise and workshop that you went through, and share just a little bit about what that experience was like and what you found valuable about it.
I think the vision workshop to us was the workshop about the why. Why were we doing this? And I think for us, it required us to even think about what was the value of the hospital foundation. What were we here, and why did we exist to do what we do? So I lift that up because right now our finance department has to reconcile financial reports across all 8, and we're not using the same system across 8 of the 8 foundations. So we each have, there are several that are using Blackbox products, but not everybody is. And so if you are our finance person who's doing the reconciling, you really want all of us to move to one, because it's going to serve you in doing your job faster, easier. But one of the things that came up in our vision is, um, you know, is the hospital foundation's role to make the lives of the people in our finance lives easier. Well, we would love for it to be easier, but our main job is to create a system, or have a system that serves our fundraisers, and so that we can be better stewards of those funds, and that we can be better stewards of donors. And so really asking ourselves what was the main charge of our foundation, wanting to make sure that that technology vision meets that why we exist in the first place. And so that question of should we remain as 8 separate foundation came out of this technology vision workshop as well. That for now, we really believe that the strength of having 8 separate hospital foundations is that we can uniquely serve the geographic areas where the hospital is located. And so that meant that we needed a vision that brought all of us together, maybe in terms of shared services, stronger shared services, but allow for flexibility to take advantage of the differences in our community. So we wanted to balance both the stronger shared services while having the flexibility to make unique changes and be able to add characteristics that were unique to our organization. So that came up in the vision workshop too.
Yeah, that's just a great clarity, that example around sort of finance, reconciliation, ease, that's important, but you also have to keep clear that, the purpose for making this change is also greater fundraising. And so it's not just addressing some pain points, it's also having a vision for, what's the purpose of doing things better in the first place and making these changes. So that brings us into actually selecting some solutions and being able to get into that process and feel confident that when you evaluate solutions, you're prepared with the information that you need, that you can evaluate it effectively, and then develop a roadmap for putting that into place. And so as you started looking at the CRM landscape, and maybe we've been remiss that I haven't shared what a CRM solution is to begin with, but I'll give a little explanation here. What we really mean, it's the constituent relationship management system. This is be focused on your fundraising departments, and it's really intended to, gather information around your constituents. This is donors and also potential donors and other key information about them, interests, interactions, relationships, so that, these fundraising teams can have that single source of truth where they can really see their data in one place and understand, what is someone's total relationship with, yes, the individual foundations, but with health partners more broadly, and perhaps they're, supporting the organization in multiple ways. And so having that information in the CRM allows, it's really empowering, because then you can develop strategies to target folks more effectively based on those relationships, based on those interactions, and really keeping that vision of driving towards increasing fundraising. That's the purpose of being able to connect more deeply with donors, is to ultimately deepen that relationship and increase fundraising. And so, it's been a long process to sort of have the right conversations, get to the point where you feel that you can effectively evaluate those solutions. So let's talk just a bit about adhering to that timeline to get to that stage. And, how has it been, trying to stick to a timeline, and what kinds of adjustments have you had to make along the way?
Well, I'm smiling because this always takes longer than you think. I think that when we started last November, I don't think any of us thought that at this moment we would just now be reviewing potential demonstrations from our potential vendors. We thought we would have already been migrating to a new CRM today. We didn't think it would take us a year, and I think that the lesson for me, and I think for anybody thinking about embarking on this kind of change management having to do with determining a new CRM for your organization, especially if you're working with multiple sites as we are, and multiple new leaders who are leading the various hospital foundation, that trust building work, the getting consensus on the universal requirements, the getting leadership buy-in, all of that takes time. So I would say it's going to take longer than you think. I think Heller put together for the most part, realistic timelines for us. There were moments though where we thought we need more time than what we've allotted, and we didn't know that at the beginning. It wasn't until we had to confront a key milestone where we thought, okay, we're going to need a few more weeks to be able to sift through the information that came out of an assignment, of an exercise, and we need to you know think through this some more. And so that's what was really great with working with the Heller team, was we were able to look at the full timeline, make adjustments, move it, and get everybody to agree that yes, this extension of the timeline was necessary for these reasons. And this is where having multiple stakeholders at all levels of the organization and across all 8 was key, because there were decision makers at various places, and so we needed to bring everybody along. This is another reason to keep those weekly meetings, because you never know. And calling a meeting at the last minute where 12 people have to be on is really difficult to do in the moment. So having those dedicated meetings already on our calendar. Right now we're about to set new meeting dates for 2024 that will start in January and run through December, because we know that now's the time to kind of put those holes in our calendars. And so I would say for the most part, we adhere to a timeline, but there were probably 2 or 3 key milestones where we needed to extend. And then there were times where we made a decision quicker than we thought on a couple of other milestones, because we were ready to make those.
Well, you mentioned you're now at the stage where you're evaluating potential vendors. How prepared do you and the folks on the team feel to evaluate them?
Well, I think we just completed our vendor package and demo scripts. So for those unfamiliar, and I was unfamiliar until I went through this process too, what this means is you've identified a couple of potential platform solutions, and represented by 2 different companies. And you want them to come back in front of your steering committee or maybe a larger group to do a demonstration about their software that takes into consideration the processes that you maybe use often today, or maybe it's to demonstrate a process that you currently don't have, but you want to see how that platform will perform it. And so the steering committee that's been meeting weekly designed what the demo script should include. So ours included 48 elements or processes that we wanted the vendor to demonstrate for us. And so those 2 demonstration dates have been scheduled. I think they're about 3 hours each. And so we're really excited to see what the 2 vendors, now that they have the demo script in their hands, how they're going to come back to us in a couple of weeks to show this customized demonstration of their software, their platform, against those processes that we'd like to see them run for us. So I think that's going to give us some comfort on how easy it will be to use. It will also allow us to ask questions about what other products might be necessary to bring into their platform to really make it work optimally. Sometimes there's a middleware involved. Sometimes their solution can handle it all. We put together what we think are a very diverse set of processes to test. So I think after that, Jett, I think the steering committee and our foundation leaders will feel that much more confident in our decision to decide one solution over the other. We also have had conversations about maybe after these 2 demos, maybe all that does is allow us to write a very detailed RFP, where then, we can seek out, different bids from the solution. So that's to be determined. But for now, what has been identified is that based on our universal requirements, these two platforms are the ones that are best poised to serve us.
That's great. And maybe just share a little bit about, what comes next for Health Partners and the foundations after you make a selection. I know you mentioned you might be issuing another RFP, but ultimately the goal is to move forward into implementation. So maybe just share, how you see that outlook.
Yeah, so we have two demonstrations by the end of this year. So before Christmas, we'll see two demonstrations from two different solutions. By January, we hope to be able to discuss what we saw, what we heard, maybe have further questions back to the two platforms, decide maybe at that time whether we do an RFP process. We believe that we probably won't even be able to make a decision until probably second quarter of next year. And then once we decide on a solution, it's our understanding that Heller will help create a roadmap based on that solution. So given where Health Partners is in our, various current states of our current CRM, given the IT support that we have internally here at Health Partners, given, at Health Partners, we're also going through our own enterprise system migration. So where's that process right now before we introduce yet this one to lay on top of it? So there are many kind of things in front of us that we'll need to think through on the sequencing of those. But our hope is that we come out by the second quarter of next year on a clear understanding of which solutions will work for us, and then consider that decision along with other organizational technology activities, because right now many of our IT folks are involved in our enterprise migration. And so, there'll need to be some bridging of that work to this work here.
Well, thank you. And I'll close with just a few takeaways that I know, Pahoua, you and I had a chance to chat about. One is that this is really an opportunity to test that hypothesis that there's a real strength in localization and building relationships at that local level, and that the path you're moving forward with is going to build that shared efficiency while still allowing foundations to keep that strong local presence. There's been an opportunity here for vision alignment and ultimately develop an environment of generosity rather than simply focusing on the technology, using this as an opportunity to really gain a stronger shared vision among health partners in the foundations. And that really a big part of the value of the process has been those consistent action-oriented meetings where there's been accountability and a timeline, in part because you've had support from a partner like Heller, but really also because of the commitments that individuals who were energized and wanted to be a part of this process have made to that process. And so their contributions have been really valuable to the overall effort ahead. So I'll close there. I know we've got a few minutes for questions, but I'll thank you, Pahoua, for this conversation, and I'll allow my colleague Kaya to jump in with any questions for us from the audience.
Thank you, Jett.
Thanks, Jett and Pahoua. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaya, and I've been keeping a tab on the questions. And I know we're short on time here, but I have one for Pahoua that I think we can squeeze in that is about your advice for managing two different groups. You talked about working with the executive leadership team, but then also talking regularly with the heavy users of databases and kind of the end users of CRM. So the question is, do you have any advice for balancing those two different groups as you're kind of in the middle of communicating the needs between the two?
Hmm. Um, I think what has worked for us here at Health Partners is um, knowing the right level of information to deliver to each group. So at an executive leadership, they want to know, or at least the folks here wanted to know, um, keeping them abreast of the kind of high level information that they needed to know. So, for example, how much is this going to cost us? How much time do you need? They don't want the nitty gritty of the weekly meetings, but what they want to know is um, how much more time do you need, because we have these other things happening at the organization, and how will the work that you're doing today tie into that? So I needed to be familiar with other things that were happening at the organization and delivering them information timely that they needed to know that would impact other decisions across the organization. And so just having a really keen sense of what might that group need, and not giving them all the nits and gnats of the information that we were discussing at a steering committee level. And then at the steering committee level, it's helping them understand what were these big um, kind of phases, moves that were happening with our move from Lawson to Oracle, and how would that impact our timeline for this specific CRM work. And so for me, I was constantly triaging between kind of other system level work and with our senior leaders, and bringing the right information to the various groups. And I think that you need someone who can do that, who can act as the translator, who is naturally traveling across the organization in that way. I just happened to have a role that allowed me to do that. But I think that if I didn't have a role that allowed me to do that, a role like this would need to be created, manufactured, and would be given the authority to do so. Otherwise, I think there's just going to be some lost in translation there. And these are the things that really can cripple, the adherence to the timeline, or there could be some miscommunication that could delay your work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pahoua. I know we're in our final minute here, so if you have any additional questions, please find us over at teamheller.com, and Jett's email is listed on our website there. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And Jett, I'll hand it to you to final words in our last minute here.
Well, I'll just thank you again, Pahoua, for going on this journey and participating in this conversation with me. And thank you so much for our hosts today for hosting the webinar. It is greatly appreciated as well.
Yeah, thank you everyone for participating on the call. It's really strange to be here with Jett and not see any of you. So kind of an awkward environment to be in, but thank you for joining the webinar today. And Jett, always nice to talk with you.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. On behalf of AHP, we're so thankful to Pahoua, Jett, and Kyle